Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 47, the season finale of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me is my fellow traveller and the man maybe in full holiday mode, Mr. Ken Kelly. How you doing, Ken?
I'm very, very well. And as you say, season finale. This is season 2 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, and it kind of runs for the academic year. And we're just mindful that as this goes out, you are nearing the end of your academic year. Of course, if you're listening within the United Kingdom, it may well be that you're excited for the next academic year. If you're thinking of studying and you've found us, or it may be that if you're elsewhere in the world, you might be right in the middle. But here we are definitely getting into holiday mode because, of course, the British summertime is roundabout now and the sun comes out and boy, do we enjoy it. As I'm hoping that you may enjoy today's episode, kicking off with looking at person-centered therapy in Europe. And Rory's going to be linking that to a question that came in on our Facebook page. Then we're going to be looking at theory with Rory, where we're going to be looking at endings. I would never have expected that, Rory. Endings.
It's a curveball, isn't it, Ken? It's a real curveball. Endings at the end of season 2 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. So, yeah, we're going to look at endings, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how you plan for endings, and maybe some of the issues that can come up in endings with clients. Some of the client kind of behaviours that might be around endings.
Indeed. And then we're going to be ending today's episode 47 by having a little bit of a review and looking back over this last academic year at the developments that have happened in Counselling Tutor. And of course, this is all aimed at you and a way of us saying just thank you for being part of what has become, I guess, Rory, bigger than we both expected it might.
Yes, bigger than I thought it would be. That's my profile on LinkedIn when I talk about the counselling tutor work. Bigger than I thought it would be. Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? The amount of goodwill and like-minded people have just joined us on this real incredible journey, Ken.
Indeed. So let's continue with this journey by looking at that first section, which we're going to be looking at person-centered therapy, linked into a question that is taken from Facebook. And we do this all the time. Being part of our Facebook community allows you access to us. We hear your voice. We get to see the discussions. Rory, can you share what the comment that came on Facebook?
Yeah, it's from Anne Walker, one of our Facebook contributors. And if you want to know where our Facebook page is, maybe you're a new listener to the podcast. If you go to www.counsellingtutor.com, there's 2 L's in counselling. We spell it the English, UK, British way. And you go to the top right-hand side, you'll see Facebook. Click on that. It's a closed group. Just knock on the door. We'll let you in. And there's over 7,000 like-minded people training and interested in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. And occasionally people post questions and we answer them. So this one's for Anne Walker. And she says, can anyone point me in the direction of a reference where person-centered therapy became more accepted within Europe and the countries that took it on in the East? Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
It is. And
I think I might be in a position to answer that question, Ken.
I'm excited to hear, Rory, because I think Europe was pretty much dominated by other modalities, and it is, of course, an American model, person-centered. How did it find its way in?
Well, it's really, really interesting. And at the end of the Second World War, Europe was in a bit of a parlor state. There'd been bombing. It had been a long, very, very damaging war. And psychoanalysis, which was the predominant idea, Sigmund Freud, was still around. Freud, by this time, of course, had moved to London. He moved away from Germany because he was Jewish, and Jewish people were being persecuted by the Nazis, and he'd moved to London. But after the Second World War in America, one of the interesting things that happened was that America had geared up for war, but they never actually structurally had any. They'd lost soldiers for sure, in Asia and in Europe, but in terms of the infrastructure, the factories, they never had any bombings or anything like that. So what happened was that the factories that made bombs and aeroplanes and guns, then started to make kettles, toasters, TV sets, that type of thing, and the economy just boomed. And it was in that boom and that optimistic part of the American culture that the ideas of Rogers started to take shape. And, you know, if you look in the 60s, you can see California, flower power, freedom. There was a great counterculture in America. And that counterculture really kind of fostered the growth of humanism, the growth of person-centered therapy. And as such, it became a very powerful force. It became, as Maslow eloquently described it, the third force in psychology. And interestingly enough, it was British social services, the National Health Service, education that took the person-centered model. And what they did was, and this is the interesting thing, they took the core conditions, they took the three facilitative conditions, empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard, and used them to build models of service provision. And that is how it became popular. And it's really interesting. If I look at my YouTube stats, or I look at the stats for a lot of our work, we find that India, the subcontinent of India, one of the biggest populated places on the face of the earth, they are having a developed economy now. Their economy is developing very quickly. And it's interesting that person-centered therapy is of interest over there. So, yeah, it kind of carried on all over, Ken, is the answer to that. But it was the end of the Second World War and the beginnings, really, of our National Health Service and our progressive education system that really kind of concreted Rogers' ideas into the British culture.
It's really interesting. And as you're speaking about developing economies and how things are picked up during that time when maybe economies are starting to boom, people are starting to, I guess, flourish in a way. It reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the further up that hierarchy of needs you are, the more open you are to areas of self-development and self-growth. I guess if you're struggling for food and water and your basic needs, the last thing on your mind is going to be taking your problems to a therapist. Or it might be very different kinds of problems, I guess, but more about food and water related and those basic needs.
Yeah, that's in fact very true, Ken. And it would seem that, like with a lot of developing as countries develop, we see more presentations of mental health. I mean, mental health or poor mental health is highly prevalent in the United States as a percentage of the population than it is in other countries. And there are arguments saying that, you know, if you're struggling to find food and water or stay alive, then those become more pressing. There are people who say there's not a lot of research done on mental health in third world countries or developing economies. So that's the counter argument. But yeah, it does seem to be, therapy does seem to be a function of industrialized societies, something that Rogers kind of nodded to in his final book, A Way of Being.
And it's interesting to me to even look at that part of it, because it seems like if you go right back to the beginning where we would be very community orientated, I guess, and we may know our neighbors living in hunting, gathering, the simpler life. And as we become more developed, we become more isolated. And I don't think there's ever been a time, certainly in my memory, looking back on my life, where we have been more isolated, where friends are measured by a number that you have on your computer with the word Facebook next to it, yet you may not even know the name of your next door neighbor, and we become more and more lonely. And I think person-centered therapy, that somebody being there, truly hearing, truly listening, truly caring about who you are and what you are bringing, is a very rare and precious relationship. And it makes sense that in a more developing and more industrializing economy that there would be an uptake of that and more of a need, because with our progression, I guess, comes isolation. This is my view. This is not from any textbook. It's just kind of based on my frame of reference, but really interesting view.
Yeah, it's in one of my textbooks, Ken. It's in First Steps in Counselling, believe it or not.
I probably read it, and having this conversation hit a memory cluster somewhere and brought that piece of text in that I'm now claiming as my own.
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah. But you're absolutely right, Ken. It's mental health counselling is a increasing function of societies that don't have a this tribal, communal village feel to them, where people feel very alone. And I mean that's a whole different podcast, I guess, isn't it? The function of therapy in industrialized societies may even be may even be a topic for a master's degree somewhere, I would imagine.
I love it. And as you say there, we can so easily stumble on deeper topics just from a topic and that question that was brought in. Thank you very much. Was it Anne that brought that in, Rory?
Anne Walker, thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Indeed. And of course, if you have any questions, then please make sure you're on our Facebook group so you can ask them and get those conversations going. Just go to Facebook and put in Counselling Tutor. We're right at the top. It's a closed group, and it's closed so that it is only you knock on the door. We're going to let you in. That's the truth of it. But it is closed so that members of the public don't kind of stumble in if they were looking for maybe counselling help. It is for students of counselling and psychotherapy, maybe tutors or people who are interested in that learning roadway. So we welcome you in there. Facebook, Counselling Tutor, knock on the door and come and join. Close on 8,000 members that we have right now.
Wow.
Moving on to theory with Rory as we come to the end of UK academic time. Endings are difficult. That by the very nature, an ending is difficult. And I even remember with my studies, we came to the end of a very special time that we spent together as peers. And at the end, although we were walking away knowing this is the end of that journey, there's still that wanting to cling on, but we'll keep in touch and we'll all get together from time to time. And the truth is, we didn't. I still keep in touch with a few of them, but it really was an ending. And I recall it being difficult for me to face it as a proper ending. And many of you listening to this may be coming to the end of your studies. You may choose not to go on and do any more levels, or it may be that you've come to the end of your studies and you may be going out to practice. It may well be that you're in practice, in placement, and you're discussing endings with your with your clients that you're seeing at the moment, because you might be going away or taking a break, or they might be going away and taking a break. So they can be complex, Rory, and you're going to share some theory on that.
Yes, I am. And one of the things I would say is, as this podcast goes out, there will be a lot of people, ending their counselling training, moving on with their lives. Their paths will go different directions. And one of the things that I always used to teach, and I really firmly believe, is that if you've not looked at the endings in your own life and you're not kind of comfortable with how things have ended, can be quite difficult, I think, to have satisfactory endings with clients. It's our old friend. Shall I mention our old friend again, Ken?
Please do.
Transference. Hello, Transference, my old friend. Yeah, and sometimes, and I've known it as someone who taught, and also in my own practice, where you're working with a client and, it's coming to an end, it is ending, and, it sometimes can touch your own material. And if you've not worked through endings, and certainly unsatisfactory endings, you can project it onto clients. There can be transferential issues. So I'm going to be talking about, in theory with Rory, about how to make satisfactory endings with clients. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the avoidance strategies that clients use to avoid endings, because sometimes clients don't want to end, and we have to because we're contracted for fixed amounts of therapy. Yes, I'll be talking about that, and also I'll be making a handout. So there'll be a handout for people to take. And one final thing, apparently endings is the most complained about thing to ethical bodies, where clients complain that their therapist hasn't prepared them enough for an ending, and they put a complaint in. So it's going to be worth reading, I think, for those in practice.
Indeed, and worth listening to. So let's get straight into that with Theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees-Oakes.
Endings. All good things come to an end, or so the old adage would have us believe. And counselling is no different. Hopefully in a counselling relationship, the ending phase will be planned in advance and hopefully will allow the client to explore how they feel about endings. Certainly in my practice, when I worked in a practice that offered 6 or 12 sessions, I would talk about an ending phase really from the beginning at the contract I'd say we can offer 6 sessions, and that's the amount I can offer, or 12 sessions, and that's the amount I can offer. So the client then has a choice of taking on the therapy. They may want to go to a therapist who can offer more sessions, or alternatively, they can go away and think about which issue they want to deal with first. They can prioritise the issue. Sometimes we call that focusing, where the client looks at which issue they want to work with. As the therapy unfolds, it may be noticeable that clients become just less dependent on the counsellor. They may be able to draw on their own inner resources, or as we say in person-centred therapy, internal locus of evaluation, to be able to make their own decisions and rely less on other people, to be, in terms of therapy, self-actualised. But sometimes clients don't return, and there's some really good reasons for this. Sometimes it's issues such as health. Client becomes ill and they just cannot return to therapy. Work patterns. Work is a very changing thing now. People on shifts, people on 0-hour contracts, people just working more and more, it would seem. And as a consequence of that, that can take up the time allocated for therapy. Family commitments, people have families, their families change, the dynamics of their family change. They may not come to therapy. So, these are some of the reasons for ending. It's also possible that some clients just don't get on with the therapist. We're all human, and some people click and other people don't. And, that's been known to happen. However, if an ending is really abrupt, if a therapist is sat in the therapy room waiting for the client doesn't turn up, it can sometimes leave the therapist feeling de-skilled, confused. And if that's the case, the best place to go really is supervision to explore it. And if those feelings persist, it might be useful to explore why they're still around for you in your own personal therapy. And the reason for that is it's a good bet that if those feelings stay with you, certainly with one particular client that's ended abruptly, it may very well be that our old friend transference has come to the fore, and that at some level the client reminds you of someone in your past that maybe you've had an unsatisfactory ending with. And what's happening is that the past is interfering with the here and now, which is the basis really of transference. So some good practice. Well, some good practice is always discuss endings in advance. For those people who offer unlimited sessions, as I do as a private practitioner, I always talk about what the client wants to work with now and recontract, and ask them what they want from therapy. Now, I just don't take it on trust that we'll just go on forever. In fact, sometimes I say to my clients, my job is to make myself redundant, just so, we don't get dependency building. And, they know that at some point therapy will end. Make it really clear the final session is an ending. It's amazing how many complaints are generated when a client doesn't realise the last session's the end. They come to the end and they say, right, okay, that's fine. Well, I hope that's been useful for you. And the client says, well, don't I come again next week? And the therapist says, well, no, it's ended. So, that can generate a lot of complaints and a lot of emotional difficulty for clients if they don't know that therapy is coming to an end. And always explore with clients how they feel about endings. Work with that. And, sometimes I will share with my clients how I feel about an ending, and just share with them how I experience them now, as the difference between now and when they first, attended therapy. I've been known to say, one of my stock phrases, and it's noticeable with clients, is that they sit stronger in the chair. A lot of my clients will just sit more self-assured in the chair, and I'd reflect that back to them if that's what I saw, as a way of acknowledging how I've experienced them changing. If we don't have appropriate endings, well, the client could be left feeling vulnerable, discounted. In other words, the person who was offering this care has just basically discounted them, confused, and in some cases unable to re-engage with the life outside therapy. it's not too much of a stretch to say that sometimes with clients who are in therapy, it's part of an ending process is to help them re-engage themselves back into their lives again, so that they can just carry on in the world. And if that doesn't happen, then they may feel unable just to take their lives up again. It can be emotionally very troubling, and it also can have a very serious implication for the emotional health of the clients. I've certainly worked with clients who've had very unsatisfactory endings with therapists, and a couple of things come from that. One is that they can in some cases not be very trusting of the new therapist, and secondly, that they're just really afraid to share the material because it's a risk. It's a risk that they share it, they feel vulnerable, and if they feel that when they go back next week the therapist's gone, well, that is something that they don't want to look at. So I've made a handout just to look at endings and just kind of reiterate what I've been talking about. And I hope you find that useful.
Thank you, as always, Rory. I'm just noticing that you did the endings of Theory with Rory on endings.
Yeah, I thought I'd sneak that one past everybody. But you're smart, Ken. You picked that up. You've called me out on it.
And looking over endings, if you want to get Rory's super duper handout, the place to do that is you go to our website. That is counsellingtutor.com. Top menu bar, there's a little tab and it says podcasts. Click on that. Go down to episode 47 and you can download Rory's handout on endings from right there within the page. Put that in your file and you can refer to that when asked about endings in your assignments, because believe me, you will be asked about endings in your assignments. Really useful stuff. And sticking on that topic of endings, it is an ending for us, I guess, today, coming to the ending of the UK academic year and certainly the ending of season 2 of the Counselling Tutor podcast. It has been an epic journey. And in respect of that ending, that ending would not be possible if it hadn't been for you listening to this, accompanying us on this journey. And we just want to say thank you so much for being part of this.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. We had an idea that what we might do could be popular, but we didn't realize how popular it would become and what it means to people. When I write when I write anything or Ken writes anything, we hope it's meaningful. But to hear that feedback from you, the audience, saying to us, "Oh, this was so helpful," or "I really get it now," just kind of gives us a reason to keep doing what we're doing. And we get an awful lot of feedback like that. So we're very grateful. And of course, everything that we do is driven by the comments that you ask. So, we are here in the service of you guys. Isn't that right, Ken?
Indeed it is. And, I'm looking back just over this last academic year here in the UK, and we kind of picked up and started the Counselling Tutor. I'd say started it. It had been running for a while, but we kind of took it to the next level, made it a little bit more formal, and that was in June of 2016. And it has just been, like you say, Rory, absolutely unbelievable, the uptake on this. We created the Counselling Study Resource, the CSR. Now, the CSR, if you're a member, you're going to know exactly what that is. If you're not a member of the Counselling Study Resource, it's a paid-for service. Everything that we put out on the podcast, on our website, is free to access. But we do have a pay side to Counselling Tutor that we put in as an experiment, and that paid side was to create and supply resources for those who wanted something a little bit more robust, assignment guidance, in-depth view on theory, in-depth view on skills, and that we launched in June of 2016, and we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of members of the Counselling Study Resource from all around the world that have come in. And what's really interesting, when we started, we opened the doors to only 100 people. It was our early adopters, and we gave a special discounted price for them to come in, have a look around and inform us, to give us feedback, tell us what was working, what wasn't working, so that the CSR, Counselling Study Resource, would be directed by the service user, not by what we thought might be useful, but what they said was useful. And here's the interesting statistic. Of the early adopters that joined us, 86% of them are still with us today. 86% of our early adopters, those first joiners, are still with us a year later. They see enough value to stay with this counselling study resource. So for that, we are truly, truly grateful. Counselling study resource, we did our first live lecture on that because that's part of CSR, is having regular live lectures. They go out bi-weekly. That's once every 2 weeks, and that's during UK academic term time. So it doesn't run over breaks and holidays, so we won't have anything over this academic break. But during term time, they run. We started with our first lecture, which was comparing and contrasting the different models of therapy. And now we have over 20 lectures. That's over 20 hours of live lectures linked to theory, linked to skills, linked to the kinds of stuff that you're going to face in your assignments. And each one of those topics was directed again from our service users saying, well, Rory, can we hear more information about this? Going further through the year, there was the publication of Basic Counselling Skills, a Student Guide. It was a book that I wrote from the podcast that we were doing on skills. That went out, and that has been so warmly received. It's only been out for less than 2 months, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies have sold worldwide, with great feedback on Amazon and to myself via email. So grateful for that. Really, it's just been an astounding and astonishing journey for me, Rory.
It has, Ken, and just such a joy to see Ken Kelly, author. Fantastic. I've got a copy of your book. You very kindly sent me a signed copy, which is in my library at the back. So it's just been a wonderful, wonderful journey, and we thank you for coming along with us. It's the word I'm going to use, Ken, is incredible. That's the top word I use when I think things are really fantastic. It's incredible the amount of people who've took what we're doing to their hearts, and it's a two-way street, as you say. We know you guys ask us what you need, and we try and produce it. That's really the deal, isn't it?
It is, and endings can sometimes mean new beginnings. You need to reach the end of a chapter before you can start the next chapter of a book. And with Counselling Tutor, with our counselling study resource, Rory and I are planning for how we're going to pick up in the new academic year. There's going to be a little bit of a break, but believe me, Rory and I won't be enjoying that break and lying in the sun. We're going to be working away feverishly for the new plans to take us into the 2017-2018 academic year. And our sole purpose is to service you, our listener, our audience, and to provide valuable content. And how do we know what that content is? Well, you tell us, and you tell us via our Facebook page. So make sure you're on there, because the discussions that happen on Facebook are obviously what is topical, and we act on that. One of those such discussions, again, something that came about because you asked for it, you discussed it, you set those seeds, was the recent lecture, two-part lecture that was done by Rory, highly successful, and that is on preparing to work therapeutically with clients who've experienced sexual abuse and trauma. Outstanding lectures, and they were so well attended. And where that kind of varied a little bit is that is not linked into what you might write in your assignments or your academic syllabus, but you showed us that you need information and informed lectures outside of that. And because of the amazing uptake on that lecture, Rory and I are planning more such lectures coming up, so you can expect more of those coming.
Yes, so that brings us to the end of Season 2 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. And as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and if you're out in the sun, use sunblock.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.